It was supposed to be a normal morning. A billionaire, a quiet neighborhood, and a sleek yellow Ferrari. But just as he reached for the car door, a little boy screamed 3 chilling words that stopped everything. "Don't get in the car." What happened next uncovered a terrifying secret, a decades-old betrayal, and a bond no one saw coming. Stay with us, because this true story will shake your soul and restore your faith in the courage of a child. Asterisk. The morning sun bathed the quiet neighborhood of Willow Ridge in soft golden light. Birds chirped cheerfully, tree branches swayed gently in the breeze, and distant lawnmowers hummed their usual summer tune. It was the kind of day that whispered normalcy, except it wasn't. Down the curved street lined with identical picket fences and manicured lawns, a man in his early 40s locked the front door of a modest yet elegant rental home. Dressed in a charcoal gray suit, expensive Italian loafers, and wearing a watch that cost more than most families' monthly rent, Victor Langston looked every bit the successful tech magnate he was. But he wasn't always that man. Victor had grown up poor, raised by a single mother in a crumbling apartment in the South Side. He had built Langston Systems from scratch, launching mobile education hubs in underfunded schools around the country. Today, he was supposed to announce a groundbreaking $10 million scholarship initiative, quietly, without the media circus. Just a small private gathering of donors at a charity luncheon across the city. To avoid public attention, Victor had left his security detail behind and booked a low-key Airbnb under an alias. No entourage, no flashy display. Just him, his suitcase, and his black Rolls-Royce Phantom parked out front. He glanced at his phone. 9:12 a.m., plenty of time, he muttered. Victor walked to the car with calm purpose. He tapped his key fob. The doors unlocked with a soft click. He opened the driver's side and bent slightly to get in. That's when it happened. A sharp voice tore through the suburban stillness like a siren. "Don't get in the car." Victor froze, startled. The shout came from his right, spinning around. He saw a young black boy, no older than 8, sprinting barefoot down the sidewalk. His hoodie flapped wildly behind him, his small hands waving in the air, face twisted in panic. "Please, sir, don't get in." "It's not safe." Victor blinked, confused. "What? Kid, are you okay?" The boy didn't stop running until he reached Victor's driveway, out of breath, eyes wide with fear. "Please, sir, I saw a man. He put something under your car. This morning, wires and a little red light. I think it's a bomb." Victor's stomach dropped. "What are you saying?" he whispered. The boy pointed under the driver's seat. "He crawled under before the sun came up. I was watching from my window. I wanted to tell someone, but my mom was at work and I didn't have a phone. I ran as fast as I could when I saw you come out." For a moment, Victor stood frozen. Then slowly, cautiously, he leaned forward and peered under the seat. And there it was, a small, black rectangular device strapped to the undercarriage with wires, a timer, and a single blinking red light. Victor staggered back. "Oh my God." He stumbled toward the porch, fumbled with his phone, and dialed his emergency contact. Within 4 minutes, 2 unmarked black SUVs screeched to a stop outside. His private security detail poured out, guns holstered, but expressions grim. One agent examined the vehicle. "Sir, confirmed. That's an explosive device, motion triggered. If you'd shut that door and put your weight on the seat." Victor didn't need to hear the rest. The bomb squad arrived minutes later. Police closed the street, and emergency crews flooded the scene. Victor stood silently on the curb, surrounded by chaos, ambulances, flashing lights, tactical officers, all while his eyes remained fixed on the small boy who had shouted at just the right moment. The boy stood alone, clutching his hands, afraid. He'd done something wrong. Victor approached him and knelt. "What's your name?" he asked softly. Yalin Miller," the boy replied, voice trembling. I live over there. He pointed to a small brick duplex across the street. Yalin. Victor paused, eyes wet. You just saved my life. Do you understand that? The boy shrugged. I just didn't want you to get hurt. Victor pulled him gently into a hug. Later that afternoon, investigators confirmed that the device was a custom-engineered bomb, set to explode the moment Victor sat in the driver's seat. It was no accident, it was a deliberate assassination attempt. But there were no threats, no warning, no ransom demands. Only questions. Victor sat in a temporary safe house, security footage rolling on his screen. They'd captured a blurry image of a man in a hoodie crouching near the car just before 5 a.m. The man had gloves, a tool bag, and moved with a slight limp. Victor's eyes narrowed. Something about that walk. The shoulders, it felt familiar. He rewound the footage. Slowed it down. That limp. That gait. It can't be, he whispered. He hadn't seen that man in over 15 years. Someone from his past. Someone who had once worked for him and had vanished after a major scandal that nearly destroyed the company. A betrayal so deep, Victor had buried it and never looked back. Until now. He turned to his lead security officer. Find out who's been near this property in the last 72 hours. And, he hesitated. Get me everything you can on the boys. Family, his name is Yalin Miller. I want to help them quietly. The agent nodded and left the room. Victor stared at the screen. He had built his empire on data, technology, and innovation. But today, it wasn't code that saved him. It was a child's voice. Victor Langston sat alone in a room that felt colder than it should have been. The lights were dimmed, casting shadows on the walls of the high-end safe house his security team had rushed into after the attempted car bombing. The luxury and sleek surfaces didn't comfort him. Not now. Not after that morning. His life could have ended in a blink, if not for a boy who had no reason to care. He turned toward the large monitor, replaying the footage again. The frame showed a hooded figure creeping along the driveway at 4:58 a.m., crouching beside the Rolls-Royce. The footage was grainy, the face hidden, but the way the man moved, slow, precise, with a slight limp, triggered something deep in Victor's memory. Freeze it, Victor muttered. The AI-enhanced playback halted. There, the shadowed face under the hood became clearer thanks to the software's predictive restoration. It wasn't perfect, but it didn't have to be. Victor's stomach clenched. Double quotes, no, it can't be. He stood abruptly, running his hand through his hair. Sir, his lead agent said as he entered the room. We identified a match. Victor turned, lips tight. Tell me. His name is Carter Ames, former lead engineer at Langston Systems. Arrested 12 years ago on charges of intellectual property theft. Served 8 years, released last winter. No fixed address, but recently seen in the metro area under aliases. Victor nodded. I know who he is. I fired him, personally. Carter had been more than an employee. He was Victor's closest friend during the early years, brilliant, imaginative, even funny when he wasn't buried in code. But something shifted. Carter started cutting corners, secretly sharing designs with rival firms for profit. When Victor found out, it wasn't just a betrayal, it was the beginning of a scandal that threatened the company's future. Victor had reported him, pressed charges. It destroyed Carter's career. He remembered what Carter had said during the hearing. You took everything from me, Langston. I hope one day you know what that feels like. 12 years later, it seemed he had returned silent and vengeful. Victor took a deep breath. Any sign he's still nearby? Not yet. But we've sent the footage to law enforcement. A federal team's been assigned. Sir, the agent paused. There's something else. Victor raised an eyebrow. The boy, Yalin, he's not just some lucky witness. We ran a background on his family. His father was Eric Ames. Victor's heart thudded. Ames? Yes. Carter's younger brother. Victor stumbled backward into the leather armchair. You're telling me Yalin is Carter's nephew? The agent nodded. Silence fell like a stone in the room. Victor's mind spun. The same man who planted a bomb to end his life was connected, by blood, to the boy who saved it. Was it fate? Coincidence? Or something deeper? Meanwhile, across the neighborhood, Jalen sat quietly on the porch steps of his small home, hugging his knees. His mother, Renee, was inside on a call with reporters who kept pushing for interviews. She had refused all of them. He didn't like all the attention. He didn't feel like a hero. He just didn't want that man to die. He remembered watching the stranger crawl under the shiny black car from his bedroom window. Something about it didn't feel right. He'd watched too many spy cartoons not to recognize danger when he saw it. The man had gloves. He was careful. Too careful. And Yalin never forgot the way his Uncle Carter used to move before he went away. Never trust silence, Yalin, he used to say. Silence is where the loudest lies hide. That voice had haunted Yalin for years. He missed Uncle Carter, even if everyone said he'd done bad things. Carter had once taught him how to sketch 3D models on an old laptop. Said he'd be a genius one day. Smarter than your uncle, I bet. But now something told him that same man had almost killed someone. Someone who turned out to be very important. And Yalin couldn't understand how someone who used to hug him goodnight could want to hurt someone else. Back at the safe house, Victor stared at his reflection in the mirror. He no longer saw the powerful billionaire the world knew. He saw the kid from Southside Chicago who used to sleep with a flashlight under his pillow because the ceiling leaked. He saw the man who had been burned by betrayal and now stood at a crossroads. Why would Carter involve his own nephew in this? He whispered. The agent answered. We believe Carter didn't know the boy was watching. He was counting on secrecy. Yalin blew everything up, figuratively, Victor exhaled. And saved my life. He walked over to the desk and opened a folder labeled Jalen Miller. Inside were school records, a short behavioral report, and a drawing probably from his teacher's report. Victor stopped. The sketch showed a car, with red lights blinking underneath. It was clear, almost too precise for a child. This kid wasn't just brave, he was brilliant. Victor made a decision. Contact his mother. I want to visit. No cameras, no press, just me. Later that evening, Renee Miller opened the door of her modest home, wearing an oversized sweater and worn-out slippers. She looked shocked to see Victor Langston standing on her porch, not in a limousine but a nondescript sedan. Mr. Langston, I didn't expect you here. Victor smiled gently. Call me Victor. May I come in? I just want to speak with your son. Inside, Yalin sat on the couch, nervously swinging his legs. Victor knelt in front of him and pulled something from his coat pocket. A small, custom-made Langston Medal of Bravery, engraved with his name. For courage in the face of danger. Victor read aloud, and for doing what most grown-ups would have run away from. Yalin blinked, speechless. I mean it, Victor said. You saved me, and I think you're smarter than you even know. He turned to Renee. I want to offer Yalin a full scholarship to any STEM school he wants. And I'd like to help. In any other way I can, quietly. Renee's eyes filled with tears. Why would you do that for us? Victor stood. Because your son reminded me what real courage looks like. And because I think our families are more connected than any of us realized. As Victor left the house, he glanced once more at Yalin, who now held the medal like it was the most precious thing in the world. A boy whose uncle tried to take his life, but who had saved it instead. And somewhere, in the growing night shadows of the city, Carter Ames was still out there, watching, waiting. Perhaps wondering if he'd been outsmarted by the same family he'd once loved. Victor's next words to his agent were sharp. We need to find him, before this turns into something worse. Because this wasn't just a story of survival anymore. It was now a story of redemption, truth, and fate. Asterisk, the night deepened over the city like a blanket of questions. Lights flickered through the mist as Victor Langston's SUV sped silently down a back road, his thoughts louder than the engine. Carter Ames was out there, somewhere. And what gnawed at Victor's chest more than the attempted assassination was the haunting possibility that he had created Carter's rage. Do monsters create themselves? Victor murmured. Or are they born from the fire we light? The car slowed outside an old warehouse district near South Milton. His security chief, Devon, turned to him. Our team tracked Carter's alias to a burner phone that pinged from this area. Last night, for nearly 2 hours. Victor nodded. I want to see it for myself. Sir, it's not safe. I wasn't safe yesterday either, Victor said, voice low. But a little boy stepped in. The least I can do is stop hiding behind bulletproof glass. Devon sighed, opened the door, and followed. Inside the warehouse, dust floated in beams of moonlight like ghosts refusing to leave. The floor creaked under Victor's polished Oxfords as he stepped over rusted bolts and torn tarps. Then he saw it, a wall covered in papers, not random, graffiti or gang tags, blueprints, news clippings, schematics of Langston Systems buildings, and photos of himself from conferences, keynotes, charity dinners. He turned to a corkboard where a single photo had been stabbed with a knife, his own face, with the word thief written across it in red marker. Devon's voice was tight. He's been planning this for years. Victor's eyes locked on a smaller yellowed paper tucked beneath the madness. A letter, dated 8 years ago. Dear Yalan, if you ever read this, I want you to know your Uncle Carter never meant to disappear. The world painted me as the villain, but I only wanted justice. Victor Langston stole my life, my patents, my purpose, my future. He made me the villain, but you don't become like me. Use your mind, protect your heart, and never let anyone define your story. Love, Uncle CVICTO. R's hand trembled. He didn't start out angry, he whispered. He started out broken. But something else caught Victor's eye now beneath the letter, a blueprint of his private home, circled in red. A note scrawled beside it. Phase 2, the message isn't over. Victor turned sharply. He's not done. Back at the Miller home, Yalan sat at the kitchen table, drawing again, but this time, it wasn't cartoons or superheroes. He was sketching a man's face from memory. His uncle's. He remembered the voice, the limp, the long hands that once helped him fold paper airplanes. But now that voice was like thunder behind dark clouds. He hadn't told anyone yet. But a letter had been slipped under their door earlier that evening. It was unsigned, and all it said was, Yalan, I saw you. I wish you hadn't gotten involved. But you're still my blood. We're not done. See, Yalan didn't show his mom. She was already too tired, too worried. But deep in his gut, Yalan felt a strange war happening inside his heart. Could someone who once taught you kindness also teach you fear? Asterisk, Victor's past comes back. Victor sat alone later that night, staring at his childhood photo. In an old album someone had dug out of his mother's attic. He had flown it in. He needed to remember who he was before the money, before the titles, before Carter. They had been college roommates, engineering geeks obsessed with quantum encryption and code that could outthink humans. They worked late nights in basements, chasing dreams with ramen noodles and caffeine. Then came the prototype, the chip that changed everything, and the betrayal. Victor's voice cracked as he whispered, what if I'd just forgiven him? What if I'd helped him instead of burying him? Devon entered. We just got a location ping. Victor looked up. He's close. We think he's watching the boy. The confrontation, it was just after 2 a.m. when Victor's convoy turned into the quiet street near the Miller home. The agents fanned out quietly. Victor approached the side of the house where a silhouette stood beneath the neighbor's tree. A man, hoodie, limp. He didn't run. Carter Ames turned slowly, even in the darkness. The two men recognized each other like broken mirrors. 12 years, said. And you still wear guilt like cologne. Victor didn't raise his voice. You tried to kill me. Carter smiled sadly. Not for the reasons you think. It was never about your money. It was about erasure. You erased me. I made a choice, Victor snapped. You stole from the company. I was desperate. You were building empires while I was trying to keep custody of my niece after my brother died. The silence between them was thick. Yalin, Victor began. He saved my life. He has your brain, your fire. Carter's jaw tensed. He shouldn't have had to. Victor stepped forward. Then let's stop this. Let me help him, not as a debt, but as a promise. A long pause. Carter's voice broke. He's the only thing I have left. Then don't make him remember you like this. Victor didn't press charges that night. Instead, he did something Carter didn't expect. He offered him a second chance. He told authorities Carter would submit to court-supervised therapy and restitution work as part of a sealed agreement. And that any threats were done, period. Some on Victor's team protested. But he was firm. If I believe in redemption for Jalen's future, I have to believe in redemption for Carter's past. And just like that, the story changed course. Jalen's morning, he awoke to the smell of pancakes. His mom was smiling. Victor was sitting at the table. Next to him, Uncle Carter, clean-shaven, still tired, still worn, but different. Hey kid, he said, you still draw superheroes? Yalin nodded, cautiously. Good, because I think you just became one. The message. Victor stood before a private gathering of young inventors a week later. He held up a simple drawing Yalin had made of him holding hands with Carter and Yalin. This, Victor said, is the future. Not one built by revenge or bitterness, but one where even the deepest pain becomes the foundation for healing. A boy saw danger and chose action. A man faced his past and chose mercy. And I chose to believe that it's never too late to rewrite your story. A soft breeze rustled the curtains inside the Brooks household as early morning sunlight spilled onto the wooden floor. The quiet was calm but alive, like the world had exhaled after a long, tense breath. Yalin stood at the window, holding the drawing he'd sketched the night before. 3 figures, one small, one tall, one limping. Holding hands. He hadn't added faces, not yet. Something inside him told him this wasn't just a drawing. It was a question. And the answer was still unfolding. Downstairs, Victor Langston sipped tea beside Renee Brooks, who looked far more rested than he'd seen her in days. The exhaustion that once clung to her shoulders seemed to have lifted just slightly, enough for her to breathe again. Victor didn't ask for her trust anymore. He simply showed up, quietly, respectfully, every morning since the incident. No cameras, no handlers. Just him. In the living room, Carter sat on the edge of the couch, dressed in simple clothes Victor had provided. He looked like a man who hadn't yet decided whether to sit or stand in life. A man caught between wanting to disappear and knowing he couldn't afford to. The court hearing was scheduled for the following week, and while Victor had pledged to support an alternative sentence therapy, community work, and restitution, nothing was certain yet. What was certain, though, was that something in Carter's eyes had changed. The bitterness wasn't gone, but it no longer screamed. It whispered. The tension between the two men had thinned over the past few days, not with grand apologies or dramatic conversations, but with silent actions. Sharing space, helping Yalin fix a broken toy, washing dishes together without speaking. Sometimes healing doesn't shout. Sometimes it simply shows up and stays. Victor looked at Carter and asked quietly, "Do you want to come with me today?" Carter hesitated. "Where?" Victor set down his cup. "The gala. The one I was supposed to give the speech at before." He trailed off. I'm going. And I'm not just going to talk about computers this time. I'm going to talk about people, about second chances. About him. He nodded toward the stairs where Jalen's footsteps padded softly above. Carter looked uncertain, but eventually he gave a single nod. Not for himself, but for the boy who had unknowingly tied two broken men back to the thread of purpose. That evening, the event hall shimmered with chandeliers, glass sculptures, and an orchestra playing softly in the background. The Tech and Education Future Forward Gala was in full swing, an evening that once would have been about networking and headlines. But tonight, it felt like something else, real, human. When Victor Langston walked on stage, the audience rose. Not just for his wealth or achievements, but for the story they had all heard on the news. The billionaire whose life was saved by a child. A child with no power, no title, only courage. But what stunned everyone more was when Victor motioned. Behind him, Jalen stepped onto the stage in a navy blue blazer and polished shoes. His small hand held a folded drawing. And beside him, quietly, with his head slightly bowed, walked Carter. Gasps echoed around the hall, followed by a silence so profound, even the orchestra stopped playing. Victor stepped to the microphone. Before I say anything about innovation or funding, I want to tell you a story, a true story. Not about a machine or a deal or a software update, but about a little boy who screamed the truth loud enough to save a life. And about a man who found out that redemption isn't earned in headlines, but in humility. He turned to Jalen. He's the reason I'm standing here tonight. The crowd applauded, many on the verge of tears. And this man, Victor said, gesturing toward Carter, was once part of my past, a part one tried to erase. But I've learned that when you bury someone's pain, you don't get peace, you grow resentment. I wronged him in ways I didn't even see at the time. But tonight, he stands here not because he has to, but because he chose not to run. Victor paused. What we do with our second chances defines our legacy far more than what we do with our first. He turned back to the crowd. So tonight I'm announcing a new fund, not for technology, but for truth. The Brooks Grant Initiative. A $10 million fund dedicated to community kids who show courage in quiet places, who act when it's hardest, speak up when they're smallest, and lead with heart instead of fear. The applause was thunderous, but Jalen didn't smile for the crowd. He looked at Carter. And for the first time in a long time, Carter smiled back. A real one. One that broke something old and angry inside him. A smile that belonged to an uncle, not a fugitive. After the speech, the three of them stood backstage. Victor knelt down to Jalen. How do you feel? Jalen shrugged. A little weird. A little like a superhero. You are, Victor said. And I want to ask you something. Jalen blinked. Would you ever let me mentor you, teach you tech, help you build your dreams? Jalen looked at his mom, who had just walked in, glowing with pride. She nodded slowly. Only if he still does his chores, she said with a grin. Victor laughed. Deal. Later that night, as the limo pulled into the quiet neighborhood, Carter looked out the window. He had no mansion, no tech company, no clean record, but he had a choice. When the car stopped, he turned to Victor. I'll take the program. Whatever the court decides, I'll go through it. Not because you asked, but because Jalen deserves to see men rise, not fall. Victor nodded. Then let's both rise. Carter opened the door and stepped out into the night. Jalen followed. Victor 2.3 shadows, once separate, now side by side. As they reached the porch, Jalen looked up at them. You know, he said thoughtfully, that day I yelled at the car, I almost didn't. Victor tilted his head. Why not? I was scared, Jalen admitted. But something told me if I didn't shout, something worse would happen. Like everything would go dark. Victor placed a hand on his shoulder. Sometimes the scariest voice is the one that saves the most. Light, Yalan smiled. So what now? Victor looked at Carter, then at Renee, who stood in the doorway, watching with calm warmth. Now, he said, now we build. Not with bricks or steel, but with forgiveness, truth, and the kind of courage that changes not just one life, but many. As the stars emerged above the rooftops of their quiet street, one thing became clear. Sometimes the voice that saves you doesn't wear a suit. Sometimes it wears sneakers, carries a crumpled drawing, and believes in heroes even when the world doesn't. And sometimes, the most powerful thing you can do is listen. The car never exploded, but everything else did. The pain, the past, the silence, and from the ruins, they built something rare, a bond, a future, a legacy, together.